When you're building in the cloud, you're constantly faced with this choice. Do I write some powerful custom code to solve this problem, or do I just use a simple managed solution that the platform gives me? Well, today we're going to dig into a really great case study that shows why sometimes the simple answer is absolutely the best.
Okay, let's just dive right in. We're going to tell a story about a super common challenge you run into at the network edge. It's one of those scenarios that just feels like it's begging for a clever piece of code, but as you're about to see, there's a real hidden cost to being that clever. So first up, let's meet our developer. We'll call him Timothy. He's just built what seems like a perfect solution for adding security headers to all his web traffic, and he's done it with custom code running right at the edge of the network.
I mean, he's written this lean, mean JavaScript function for AWS CloudFront. It literally grabs every single response heading out to users and injects these crucial security headers. And just look at these specs. It's insanely fast. We're talking under a millisecond, and it's cranking through millions of requests without even breaking a sweat. So on the surface, this looks like a huge win.
And Timothy is, rightly very proud of this. He's showing his architect, Margaret, and saying, look, the performance is so good, the latency is basically zero. It's invisible. It really is a textbook example of just how powerful edge computing can be.
But this is where our story takes a hard turn. Because his architect, Margaret, she offers a totally different point of view. She brings up this critical idea that every single line of custom code you write, no matter how simple or brilliant, it's a long-term liability. It's something you now have to own and monitor and maintain and pay for forever. And that right there changes everything.
Now, Margaret isn't just there to criticize, she's got an alternative. And her solution really gets to the heart of a core principle of modern cloud architecture. If the platform gives you a native feature that does the job, you should almost always use it.
So she points Timothy to this native feature called a response headers policy. It's something AWS built for this exact purpose, adding common security headers. So instead of writing code to mess with a response, you just configure a policy. It's a simple, declarative, do this, instead of here's how to do this.
And this slide is where it gets really interesting, because we can compare them side by side. I mean, look at the difference in maintenance. You go from having this code liability to just a managed service. And security audits, instead of asking your auditor to read and understand your JavaScript, they can just look at a straightforward policy. It is night and day.
And this is the killer feature. While Timothy's function had a small charge for every single time it ran, which really adds up when you're talking millions of requests, the managed response headers policy costs per invocation a big fat zero. It's completely free to use.
Okay, so at this point, Timothy, being a sharp developer, asks a fantastic question. He says, okay, this is great for static files, but what about our dynamic API responses? The stuff coming from our own backend servers. Won't CloudFront's cache just strip out the headers our backend is generating?
And Margaret explains that this is a really common misconception. When CloudFront gets a request for something it doesn't have cached, what we call a cache miss, it just goes to your backend. Your backend then sends the data and it sends its own headers. The magic happens in step 4. CloudFront is designed to cache not just the object, but also any headers you tell it to keep. So how do you tell it which headers to keep? Well, surprise, surprise, you do it with another managed feature. This one's called a cache policy. In here, you can just explicitly whitelist the headers coming from your origin that you want the CDN to remember and serve up along with the cache stuff.
So here it is, the crucial point of this whole thing. The problem of re-adding headers at the edge, it was based on a false premise. If you control the origin server, you can just send the headers you need from there, and then just configure the CDN to preserve them. The custom edge function, it's completely unnecessary.
This whole story really boils down to a clear, repeatable decision-making framework that any of us, as architects or developers, can use. The big question? When should you build, and when should you just configure?
And this table just lays it out perfectly. Look, if your configuration is static, like a security header, and you control the origin, you should always use the managed policy. Always. You save the custom edge compute for when things really truly have to be dynamic, calculated for every single request, or when you're stuck working with some third-party API that you just can't change.
And making this choice, it's not just some small technical detail. It has a huge impact. You are actively reducing your operational costs. You're making your system way easier to secure and audit. You are lowering your long-term technical debt, and you're aligning your work with what is considered an architectural best practice. So we're going to leave you with this final thought. I want you to take a look at your own systems. That clever little function you wrote last year, the one you were so proud of,
Is there a managed service now that does the same thing, but better, cheaper, and more securely? What liability, what piece of code can you remove from your system tomorrow?